Hello there, Tactician. Professor Blap here to help you climb the ladder, and today we're going to talk all about the unlockable champs of Set 16. Now, if you missed my previous video, make sure you check it out as I go over all the traits and the set mechanic there, and I'll be assuming you've already watched that and know all about it for the stuff we're going to be talking about in this video. But what we are going to cover today are all 40 unlockable champions, which is a lot on a new set on top of the 60 you already have, so buckle up. Before we jump into that though, there's actually 3 hidden mechanics you should know about for these unlockable champs. They're going to be common to all of them. So number 1 is that when you unlock a champion, they do get added to your pool, but one of the questions I see a lot is that going to mess up the odds of other units in your shops and kind of dilute your pool when you're rolling? Yes and no. So the units do get added to your pool, but if you don't buy an unlocked unit or don't have them on your board, then you actually will see them less often than other units. So this means if you unlock a champion accidentally, say for example Volibear, by just having a unit with a bunch of HP, but you don't want to play the unit, just don't buy it, and then hopefully you'll see it less often, and it won't dilute your other units too much. The second hidden mechanic that they added is the unlockable champions actually has slightly reduced odds once you 2-star them. So the first 3 copies will come at the normal rate, but to find the additional copies you may need to 3-star are going to be a lot harder than the usual champions. This is done to simulate contesting because normally if someone sees you buying a lot of say a 4 cost, they can buy copies to keep them out of the pool and prevent you from hitting that 3-star. Now, unless someone else has unlocked that unit and are buying it, no one can completely lock you out. But generally this means it's recommended if you're going for a 3-star 4 or 5 cost, you probably want a duplicator or have a ton of gold or free rerolls before doing so, as it is going to be harder to do with those unlocked units. And the third, not quite a hidden mechanic, but something useful to know about, especially in the context of some of the champions we're talking about today, is that the unlock conditions can actually be done on a PvE round. Now, this is going to be extremely important for certain units that require you to equip a number of items to a different champion, because one of the tricks that we'll see and talk about is you can actually unlock these by stage 2-1 by quickly equipping the components you drop in your initial PvE round. But we'll cover that when we get to the champions when that matters most. So without further ado, let's dive into this. Okay, so I know 40 champions can be very intimidating for some of the newer players out there, so what I try to do at the beginning is actually break these down into a tier list of what I think are the most important ones to actually start with when learning the unlock conditions, because it's quite a lot to do all at once. Now, the first thing to note is that this tier list is very subjective, and it's in no way tied to the strength of any of these units or comps. So whether you want to unlock these units because of a certain comp or what's popular in the meta is up to you. But all I'm saying is if you're going to be learning and trying to study up on how to unlock these, I would roughly go in this order. S tiers are ones that generally going to appear in a lot of boards and are probably not ones you'll naturally unlock. So these are the highest priority to memorize because unless you go out of your way for them, you generally won't be hitting them on regular boards. A tier ones are ones that are important to figure out direction and require you usually to plan as early as stage 2, but not ones that you'll be unlocking every single game in and out. And then B tier ones are ones that more for specific lines, but not generally good units that you'll be unlocking. And finally, C tier are ones that either aren't very useful or pretty natural to unlock, so you don't actually have to go out of your way to learn them. You'll notice a lot of the vertical cap unit 5 costs are here, despite those units actually being fairly strong. That's because you kind of get to them naturally without trying. And finally, the ones in this X tier are super specific and only apply to a specific line. If you're playing that line, they're going to be really obvious. If you're not playing the line, you don't really need to pay attention to them at all. So as you can see from the tier list, there's already 19 champions that are in that bottom 2 C and X tier, which makes memorizing these a lot more manageable. That's half of them pretty much gone. But let's dive in. But we're going to go in order, starting with what I think is the most important one to learn, Sett. So Sett has the easiest unlock requirement for 5 cost and simply requires you to field a single unit in the first 2 rows, basically a solo frontline unit. You might already be doing this if you're playing around something like a Gargoyles with a very strong itemized tank. Now, because he is so easy to unlock, that does mean his power is a little bit lower than other 5 costs, so he's not going to be that strong on your late game boards, but it's a guaranteed unlock you can get as soon as you hit level 8. So if you happen to be playing something like Vertical Ionia or even splashing 3 Ionia, Sett can be a pretty useful unit to unlock, especially if you have, say, a Hodge or some other melee AP items that you already slammed earlier. Another good way to use Sett is if you're, for instance, trying to play the Arcanist line, built some Sylas items, they have basically the same itemization. So you can always use Sett as an item holder until you actually get to the Sylas conditions, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But very useful to know about, and again, the easiest 5 cost to unlock to quickly spike your board. Coming at number 2 is going to be Bard. A lot of you might already know how to unlock Bard, but you basically need to reroll your shop 4 times before the first carousel. Now, these could be paid rerolls, but the way you usually want to unlock this is with free rerolls you get from an Augment. So the best example is Too Much Value. That's going to give you 4 rerolls before that. You can also use Patience is a Virtue, the Silver Augment, or even something like Epoch, which gives you 3 free rerolls, and then you can reroll 1 more time to get Bard. Generally, you do not want to unlock Bard just with your gold, as that's going to grief your econ quite a lot, spending 8 gold just on rerolls, and kind of makes him not as worth it. The other important thing to know about Bard is even though you get free rerolls when losing, that's not the most powerful effect. In fact, when you win, it says you get a unit from Runeterra, and what this actually does is it gives you a slightly tailored random unit. I would say about 50 or maybe 60% of the time, it gives you a unit that's either on your board or bench, and other times it just give you something random. But what that means is you shouldn't be holding onto units on your bench that you don't actually want copies of with Bard, as that's going to dilute the units that you're getting. You can also use him as a primary carry as well. Often 3-starring Bard is very good if you have a lot of other 3 stars on your board already. Next up, we have 2 units that are priority mainly for their really good traits. So Kennen, first of all, giving you Defender, Ionia, and Yordle, which is actually very important for Ryze. Yordle is a very easy one to unlock, and paired together, as you'll see later, with Puppy and Xinjiao, will give you a lot of leeway into Ionia Demacia, completing those 2 regions for Ryze. He's also very difficult to unlock at low levels because you need 8 total star levels of Defenders, Ionias, or Yordles, which sounds pretty easy, but if you've been playing the set a lot, unless you're actively thinking about Kennen, you're very likely to miss it. You don't tend to usually start up all of those units. So one thing to do, especially just before the stage 3 PvE round, is hold on to spare Defenders, Ionias, and Yordles, and then swap those units in for anything that isn't one of those types for that PvE round, hit that 8 requirement, and then get in before 4-1. It's really expensive usually to sacrifice an entire round just to unlock a unit. So that's one way you can do it. And it's pretty rare to be able to unlock him by stage 2 unless you have a lot of upgrades. But his trait waves are very important. It's also one of the reasons that Jarvan is extremely important to hold, right? He is a defender that goes into Kennen, and as we'll see later, is an important unlock condition for Sylas. So Jarvan stonks are really high this set, and make sure you hold onto him very early on and pretty much don't sell him until you have a 2-star. Kobuko is in a similar spot, not so much for the Ryze boards, but Bruiser and Invoker, which he has, are both very strong support traits. Bruiser 2 giving you that flat HP, and Invoker 2 giving you that 1 mana regen, and pairs extremely well with 3 Freljord. Again, kind of like Kennen, the condition sounds easy, 6-star levels of Bruiser or Invoker, but the way the traits kind of work in this set, it's actually pretty hard to hit that requirement. So if you are playing for an Invoker board, you most often will want Kobuko as one of your Invokers, just so you have more frontline. But to do that, you will have to go a little out of your way sometimes to unlock him. So hold on to those early Invokers, or maybe play for 4 Bruisers early on as your frontline, and then you can very easily unlock him. He also requires level 7, unlike Kennen. Kennen can often unlock with good upgrades by level 6, but Kobuko, you will have to keep those units in until level 7. But as I mentioned, pairs really well in Freljord with Lysandra and also Volibear. Alright, next up we get into the A tier. Remember, these aren't ones that you're going to necessarily unlock every single game, but if you're going for one of these lines, it's really important that you keep these requirements in mind before diving in, because if you miss your window, you'll potentially never unlock these at all. So first of all, Sylas, one of my favorite units in the set. If you haven't seen a Sylas decimating a board, it's really fun in 6 Arcanist. The important thing for Sylas is you need to sell that 2-star Jarvan. If you get into stage 4 and you're level 8 and you're trying to dig for a 2-star Jarvan, you're going to have a bad time. So if you at all think you'll be playing towards Sylas and some AP line, make sure you hold on to every single Jarvan you see in those early 2 stages, even if it griefs your econ, right? Unless you can, if you give up on the Jarvan early on, just forget about Sylas. You're very likely not going to hit that Jarvan too. Definitely very solid as a pivot off of Demacia, right? You're selling 2-star Demacia units. So one of the ways you can get into Sylas is to play for that 7 Demacia vertical. And then at some point, once you go level 9 or you have some different caps, you can sell the Lux too, especially if you have replacement Lux on your bench ready to go. But sell your Lux 2, sell your Garen, replace it with a different front line, sell the Jarvan, and then put in a Sylas 2 with your Lux items. And next up, Aatrox, another one that's pretty easy to miss if you're not planning for it. Luckily, though, it's not as bad as Sylas, right? You need 40 Omnivamp, which can be difficult if you don't get the right components, but you get a lot of bailouts either from augments that will give you Omnivamp. There's a lot of artifacts now that give you Omnivamp as well. But in general, for Aatrox, you're going to need 2 Omnivamp items and 2 to 4 Slayer activated on the unit, and then you'll be able to get to 40 Omnivamp, and you also have to hit level 8. Usually Bloodthirster plus Hodge plus I think 2 Slayer is enough to activate it, but if you don't have Bloodthirster, you're going to either need to come up with another augment or build 4 Slayer with 2 Hodges or something in that combination. And another thing to keep in mind is obviously Aatrox is a Darken, so you might have seen those Darken artifact weapons flying around. Remember that Darken 1 does give you 15 Omnivamp, so even if those weapons don't say they provide Omnivamp, they're basically equivalent to like half a Hodge. Doesn't give you a lot of Omnivamp though, so if you do have a Darken weapon plus a BT, you probably still need to activate 2 or 4 Slayer in order to hit that 40 threshold. But make sure you're planning for this from the beginning, because you really want to hit Aatrox as soon as level 8. It's a very powerful spike on level 8 for those melee boards, so make sure you save your BT Hodge components for that Aatrox unlock, or pick augments that get you there as well. And third in A tier, I put Yorick because he is kind of the gateway to the whole Shadow Isle line. We'll see the other Shadow Isle units later. We're not going to be talking about them now because it's very specific. But you need to know your Yorick unlock conditions, which is simply by having 2 items on specifically a Viego 2. This is the only one that requires kind of a specific star level. A lot of the other item slams don't. So keep that in mind. If you don't have a Viego 2 by as early as 1-4, you should avoid playing the Shadow Isle line. Now, the reason why I say 1-4 is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is one of those places where you have that trick where if you're fast enough, especially deciding what items to slam, if you immediately slam, usually you get 3 components in that first PvE round, right? So if you immediately slam 1 item on Viego and then add the component, that's the 2 items on 1-4, and that will give you Yorick as soon as 2-1, right? That gives you the souls as early as you can, so you can start stacking up Viego and Shadow Isles as early as you can. It is very snowbally, especially if the hero augment shows up for you. But you do have to be very quick about that. And one thing to avoid, if you find yourself in a 2-component opener, which does happen, do not go into the Shadow Isle line. Unlocking it by first carousel is too late. Just forget about it. It's one of the disadvantages of the Shadow Isle line. It's very cool in its unlock system, but it's very much gatekept by the unit you get early and also the component drop. So there are some games where you just won't see anyone playing Shadow Isle for that reason. Next up, we have Poppy, and similar to Kennen and Kobuko, Poppy just has a lot of valuable traits, right? Being Demacia, Yordle, and Juggernaut. The 3 units combined between Poppy and Kennen and Xinjiao give you 2 Yordle, 2 Demacia, and 2 Ionia. So if you're ever going for a Ryze line, if you look at that, that's already most of the way to 3 different regions. All you need is an extra Demacia unit and an extra Ionia unit, and then you can splash 2 of Void or Piltover as your final region with Targon, and you have all the traits you need to unlock Ryze. Now, of course, coming out of PBE, they did nerf Ryze to only be played on, to only unlock on level 9. That might change in the future. He's a little bit weak now on level 9, but anytime you're playing for Ryze, do keep those 3 units in mind. They can be hard to unlock for the other 2, but Poppy's pretty easy. All you need to do is put 2 items on any Yordle or any Demacia unit. Keep in mind, they don't have to be upgraded like for Yorick. They can be 1-star as well. The other time that's really important is if you're playing for a 4 Yordle line, one thing you can do is if you have 3 Yordle in on 1-4, use the same trick as Viego. Try and slam 2 items or 1.5 items right away on one of your Yordles. Then that gives you a Poppy on 2-1, and you can level up and then field 4 Yordle as soon as that 2-1 hits. That means you're getting a free Yordle in your shop right away. That gives you the earliest opportunity to upgrade your Yordles, and that gives you the most tempo playing to the Yordle line. You will be a little bit poor because you're buying all of these units and holding them on your bench, but hopefully the tempo will make up for that, let you win more fights, and snowball from there. So another important trick with that 1-4 unlock. Also going to be very important in the Demacia 7 because your 8th unit usually is going to be Swain. And so Poppy helps you unlock Juggernaut along with that as well. So mostly you'll be playing that on the 7 Demacia boards as well. All right, Graves. Now, meta-wise, Graves right now as of recording is probably more important than some of these because the 3 Bilgewater line is so important. But the way you unlock Graves is you get 2 items on a Twisted Fate. So same as the other unlock ones, you don't need a 2-star again for this one. So just 2 items on Twisted Fate. And normally, you'll start at the game off with Alawi and TF most often, and getting Graves immediately allows you to put in that Bilgewater 3. From 2-1 to get the Silver Serpents rolling. Now, Bilgewater is a very snowbally comp, right? The earlier you get those Bilgewater upgrades, the earlier you upgrade your units. It means the more fights you win, and the more fights you win, the more units you kill, the more Serpents you get, so yada, yada, yada. It just makes a huge difference that you can get this on 2-1 versus not. So if you start with a TF, and you're thinking of playing Bilgewater, especially if you already have an Alawi, make sure to put that TF in on 1-4, and then slam those items just to unlock Graves right away. If you already have a Nolas or a Game Plank, less important of you to do this because you will need a TF anyway for 3 Bilgewater, so it doesn't really matter. All right, next up is Singed. Now, Singed requires you to take 35 player damage before getting unlocked, as well as fielding 4 Juggernaut Zorn, which is not that difficult. The hardest thing is actually at 35 damage. Now, luckily, this means it's a very good opener off of 6 loss streak. Normally, 6 loss streaking at the beginning isn't very good unless you have a specific condition or a augment that's pushing you to do that. Generally, you want to avoid loss streaks outside of that. But unlocking Singed is a pretty good way to stabilize you on stage 3. Now, as of recording, they maybe over-nerfed him a little bit, so I'm not quite sure right now, but I'm sure he'll bounce back, so will become relevant once again. Very good combo with this, obviously, augments like Calculated Loss as a loss streak augment, but also risky moves because you take that damage early on. You really only need to lose 1 fight before you are able to unlock Singed, and then from there it's just really easy to come back and win streak. But if you do, Singed is one of the earliest forecasts you can actually unlock because he's not gated behind level requirement. Just make sure you get that 6 loss in because that maximizes your econ as well as giving you Singed as early as possible. Next up, Skarner is a great utility unit to know about, so I highly recommend memorizing this. And all you need is a Gargoyles. And Gargoyles is a pretty good slam right now. I think they buffed it a little bit going into set 16. So you see it recommended a lot on a lot of the meta sites. Specifically, you need to equip this to a non-tank unit. Now, you can equip this on frontline units, but if they're fighters, so you don't necessarily have to put it on a backline unit. But either way, the best way to do it is to just do it on a PvE round. Again, it's not usually worth sacrificing an entire round. If you're lost streaking anyway, go ahead, slam that Gargoyles onto a backliner and get that Skarner unlock. You also do need level 7, so don't do it too early. Especially if you're playing the Ishtar reroll line, you're not always going to be level 7 right away, so don't waste your remover too early. You do have to wait till you're level 7. But once you do, Skarner has that great team buff that gives your team armor, as well as just being a really solid frontline tank as a forecast. Next up, Rift Herald is pretty important if you want to play Vertical Void especially. You basically need to have 2 Void activated for 8 rounds, which sounds pretty easy, but 8 rounds is a long time, and effectively you need it before the first carousel. So if you haven't been able to find 2 Void before then, generally not recommended to play Vertical Void, because Rift Herald really goes well with the tank mutations, and is much better than any of the other options in Vertical Void. But if you are playing towards Void, it's almost guaranteed to happen after the second carousel. So also a very powerful tank, even if you're not looking to play Void indefinitely, just really strong in that stage 3 once you unlock him, if you've been playing it since the beginning of the game. All right, to round off the A tiers, we have Mel. Now, in some ways, Mel can be thought of as the cap to Noxus, but in general, Mel's just a great splash on almost any endgame board, pairing with Azir, another 5-cost for 2 Disruptor. I believe it's one of the only 5-cost pairs that have the shared traits like that. So you'll probably see Mel and Azir very commonly on those really high-capped 5-cost boards. The unlock condition, though, is pretty hard. It reads easy, but it's actually pretty hard to get, which is a 2-star Ambassador, mainly because you'll probably have a lot of people contesting this as well, buying Ambassadors from the shop. So if you do plan on playing Mel, make sure to save those ambassadors, keep them on your bench, and if you take too long finding one, it might be better to give up on Mel and play other units like Seraphine as a disruptor instead. But with how commonly Swain is being played as a frontline unit as well, the combination of Swain plus Mel make a great frontline backline combo. So make sure to keep this in mind for any kind of AP opener that you have. All right, moving on into B tier, kicking that off, we have Ryze. Now, the reason I put Ryze in B tier isn't because he's not strong or powerful. It's because I don't generally recommend that you play towards Ryze boards, especially if you're starting out learning the set. They can be pretty complex to play. They require two very specific unlocks in Poppy and Kennen, which, as we saw at the top, were pretty high up, but also easy to miss if you're not paying attention. So it's just one of those comps that are a little bit difficult to play and better saved for when you know the set a little bit better. But once you do, definitely try out. But as I mentioned, that trifecta, Poppy, Kennen, and Xin Zhao, very important. Gives you 2 Ionia, 2 Demacia, 2 Yordle. Then all you need is 1 Demacia unit and 1 Ionia unit for 6 total units. Then you add in a Targon, and that is 4. At least at the time of recording, I believe they have Ryze at 4 regions and level 9. That did change during PBE, so it might change again in the future, so this might not be accurate to when you're viewing it. But definitely easy to overlook that Targon itself does count as a unit. So it says, if it says 4 regions, it's really 3 regions plus 1 Targon unit. As far as playing Ryze, so far it seems like Shurima is one of the best traits to activate. I believe that farms you extra gold and components. It's just a really good scaling region to activate. So if you do play Ryze, try and find an Azir, and then play 2 Shurima off of one of the units that Azir unlocks. And we'll get to Azir a little bit later as well. And Kai'Sa we have down here, also important for Vertical Void. I put Kai'Sa a little bit lower, mainly because unlike Rift Herald, who can just be a generic tank in most comps, Kai'Sa really needs specifically to have a good condition to play. So either you are playing for Vertical Void and you need Kai'Sa as a carry, or you have some reason to play Kai'Sa as a long shot. It can be, I put it down here because I know it can be really easy to forget. I've done this so many times. If you didn't open with AP items and itemize Kog'Maw, it's pretty common to get to level 8 and just forget to unlock Kai'Sa before rolling down. A lot of the time, especially if you were itemizing Malzahar up until level 8, which is a lot more common than Kog. So make sure, if you are playing for Kai'Sa, move your items over to Kog'Maw for 1 round, and then move them back once you've unlocked Kai'Sa, and then put the items on her. Generally, though, you will need to sacrifice a round to do this. You're not likely, you do need level 8, so you're not likely to be on level 8 by the stage 3 PvE, and waiting until the end of stage 4 is too late. So you'll probably have to give up one of the rounds, just putting items on Kog, and giving up that round to unlock Kai'Sa for future use. And of course, right after Kai'Sa, we have Baron. Now, this unlock is kind of easy, but getting to level 10 is a lot harder than it sounds. You're going to need at least 1, if not 2 Econ Augments to get you there. Luckily, Econ Augments are really good right now, so you'll probably be taking them anyway. But if you are looking to try out Baron, make sure to prioritize those Econ Augments above all else. Diana is another really cool one. Now, the most common way you'll get this is if you dropped a Leona from an early loot orb, and then you get the 2 duplicator gold augment, you can instantly get a Leona 2, and then all you need from there is 2 items and a component, which usually you'll get at the very latest by the end of stage 2. And so that's why Leona is such an important hold in stage 1. You're very rarely going to be sell it just because that high roll is very powerful. Leona 2 is also just a great tank, providing burn really early on and great with any tank items. But kind of like Singed, by 3-1, not only are you snowballing this Leona 2 opener, but now you have a Diana, which I think indirectly also buffs Leona and herself when you feel both at the same time. So very strong in stage 3. So just keep this in mind. Don't sell your Leonas. Even if you have a pale Leona, it might be worth it to hold on to it, just so you can unlock Diana and try and win streak stage 3. And of course, one of the requirements for unlocking Aurelion Sol is to get that Diana first. Now, don't get too baited by this. Just because you have an early Diana doesn't make it a good spot for Aurelion Sol, because you need to get Taric, which is easier than it sounds. Everyone is playing Taric on their boards, so unless you're rolling really early, Taric's going to be really hard to find. You also really need to field Aurelion Sol by early stage 4 if you want to actually stack him to a point where he'll be keeping up with late game boards. So definitely a fun one to try. And if you're at the lower ranks, you probably have a little bit more leeway on how late you can start stacking Aurelion. But, you know, look up the meta tier list on how to best build this board. It's very specific as well. But definitely a good thing to think about if you hit that early Unit 2 and got that Diana, because that's one of the conditions out of the way. And next up is Warwick. Now, at the time of recording, currently he needs a 2-star Vi or only a 1-star Jinx. In PBE, he started off at 2-star Jinx, but I guess that ended up being too hard. So they kind of made it easier to unlock. You also need level 7, so it is gated kind of level requirement. But keep in mind that getting a 2-star Vi is actually a little harder than it might sound. You might need to roll a little bit on level 6 at early stage 3 if you don't have a 2-star Vi already and you're angling for Warwick. Luckily, Vi is a good item holder for Warwick. They're both melee bruisers. And then otherwise, you may not end up playing Jinx on your final board, but just a good unit to hold onto for Zorn as well. And rounding out the B tiers, we have Volibear. Now, the reason I put Volibear down here is despite having really good traits, he's actually kind of annoying to unlock. The reason is, so the condition is 3,800 HP, which doesn't sound like a ton, but it's actually, you're going to need at least one Warmog on a regular tank, or you have to field a lot of bruises. Now, the way the set is played right now is you don't tend to have, the 6 tank trait frontline. Normally in a normal set, you probably have a comp that's 6 bruiser or like 6, defender or something like that. We don't have that this set. There aren't that many boards that are playing 4 bruiser into 6 bruiser. So it's very hard to naturally unlock Volibear unless you're going for something like Scion or some other specific strategy. Especially as well if you're playing Freljord, right? The Freljord board doesn't actually have any bruises by default. So if you are playing the Freljord line, of course your tank is Braum. You're going to need at least one Warmogs on him. So make sure in that line to specifically save as many belts as you can and prioritize getting that second belt and making a Warmog Slam. All right, now on to the C tiers. Now remember, this is not power level based, right? The C tiers aren't here because they're worse than the other ones. These are just very specific ones, which generally you don't need to unlock very early, or you'll naturally unlock just by playing the trait that you want to play it. The first one is Trynd. Now Trynd is at the very borderline between B and C, mainly because there is this Ashe Trynd reroll, right? They have a synergy when you play them on the same board. But if you're playing Ashe Trynd reroll, you're itemizing Ashe. And if you're itemizing Ashe, you'll unlock Trynd. All Trynd needs, similar to Twisted Fate, you just put 2 items on an Ashe, you get your Trynd. So if you're playing the line, that Tryndamere goes in, you'll naturally unlock Trynd, and you'll pretty much never use him outside of that. So that's why he's in C tier, and you'll see that commonly with all the other units. So Orianna, for example, same deal. Pretty good unit in terms of having another Invoker early on, but very easy if you're playing Piltover, right? Like if you're playing Vertical Piltover, you put in 3 Piltover units, she's the 4th one. You put in her, you get 4 Piltover, and you're done. Darius, of course, is tied to Draven. You need Draven to drop at least 1 gold from his passive. But again, if you're playing 1 unit, eventually your Draven will farm 1 gold, even if you don't have him itemized, right? He gets takedowns naturally over time. The other reason Darius is also not that important is the defender trait doesn't really go very well in the Noxus line, right? Noxus wants Juggernaut to go with Briar and Swain, and you're not generally playing a second defender. In general, not a high priority. If you're playing the vertical Noxus line, again, you'll get it because you'll eventually field a Draven, and Draven will eventually farm you 1 gold. And LeBlanc is similar to Darius. There's a little bit more importance actually to LeBlanc because one of the augments that you get, the Artican scaling one, gives you a Scion and a Briar, but not a 3rd Noxus unit. So one way you can get a 3rd Noxus unit is to put 2 items on Scion. That unlocks your LeBlanc, and they can immediately field it to get 3 Noxus and get Artican scaling as early as possible. Now, because that drops from the augment, you're not likely to get that on 2-1, like some of the other PvE kind of tricks that you can do. So you have to wait until 2-2 in order to do that by fielding Scion for a round, but still pretty good if you want to go for Vertical Noxus. And LeBlanc is a little bit more important than Darius because she's going to be your main AP item holder in that line for any Mel items that you're looking to move onto her for your cap. And then we have a bunch of 5 costs. Brock, of course, very good unit. But if you're playing Ishtal, kind of natural that you'll do this. You do want to skew then a little bit to try and push for 500 as much as possible. Because when you hit 500, not only are you getting the tempo from the cash out, but you get this Brock unit to stabilize you as well. So as much as possible, if you are playing, especially like really big lose streak Ishtal, try and go for that 500 so you can get that Brock. If you're just playing Ishtal for value for a little bit, you don't have to really worry about it. And again, one thing to keep in mind with Brock is you don't need to, first of all, you don't need to cash out. You just need to earn 500 Sunshard. So if you want, if you're doing really well, you can keep pushing past 500, get that Brock unlock, and that actually stabilizes you maybe to keep pushing further to get even crazier rewards, shoot for the thousands. The other thing to keep in mind is you can of course earn that split as much as you want. So you could cash out at 250, start again, earn another 250, and then you'll unlock Brock Again, you don't have to cash out that second time either. So pretty flexible, but again, very natural if you're playing Ishtar. And similarly, if you're playing Bilgewater, you're probably buying a lot of units from your shop to eventually unlock Tahm Kench. Now, unless you're going up to 7 Bilgewater eventually and earning a lot of Silver Serpents, you probably won't actually get enough to unlock Tahm just by playing 3 for the majority of the game, right? 500 Serpents is going to be 10 rounds of 50, and that's 7 Bilgewater, so you're going to need quite a lot to do that. But once you unlock him, very good unit, but again, if you're playing Bilgewater, you'll get him. T-Hex, same deal. So to unlock the T-Hex, you need 9 star levels of Piltover units, which is pretty much all of them. The lowest cost going to be a 2-star Kate, 2-star Orianna, 2-star Vi, and a 2-star Loris. And then usually on level 8, you'll probably roll for 1 Seraphine. So it's a pretty expensive unlock. But again, if you're just playing towards that vertical Piltover, going to naturally happen over time. Not that strong of a vertical, so you're going to be chasing this a little less often than something like Tahm Kench or a Brock, but a very powerful unit if you can unlock. Next up, Galio, going to naturally happen while playing the Demacia vertical, right? Unlocks when you have 12 star units of Demacia. So similar to Piltover, that's going to be the majority of the board, right? 6 units plus 1 that is not 2 stars. So you're probably looking at either a 2-star Lux or Garen, and then you don't have to star up the last one. But again, this one sounds easy, but starring up all of your units from low to high is actually harder than it sounds. You probably will need to roll quite a bit. So don't go for this if you don't have a 2-star Sona, for example. If you don't hold on to a 2-star Sona, that means you have to 2-star both Lux and Garen, and it doesn't happen much later than you think. And unless you're already playing Demacia 7, then that's not going to work out for you very well. And next up, Fizz. I put Fizz back here because no matter what line you're playing for Fizz, either Yodel or Bilgewater, you'll just unlock it. All he needs is 5 Yodel or 5 Bilgewater and level 7. So as soon as you hit level 7, if you're playing one of the 2 lines, you'll get Fizz. If you're not playing one of those 2 lines, you probably don't want Fizz anyway. So not much to say, basically a trait bot. And lastly, Ziggs as well. Now Ziggs, unfortunately, is gated behind level 9 on top of being in 2 very underplayed verticals, Yordle and Zorn. Yordle's mainly because he's not that important as a carry, right? You're playing a lot of your lower cost Yordles as rerolls, so getting a Ziggs is not high priority, and 7 Zorn is just not in a super great spot right now. But again, all he needs is level 9 and then 3 items on either a Zorn unit or a Yordle. And if you're playing Ziggs, you probably have one of those already. All right, next into our special tier. So again, these are the ones that are really worth memorizing until you know to play those specific lines, right? They're not going to show up game in and game out, and they're not that important to go out of your way for. So we'll start with the most important to know about, the first 3 Shadow Isle units. This is probably the most common one you will play. But again, it's pretty hard to get into the Shadow Isle line. You need that Viego 2 to start snowballing the souls. But once you do, Gwen, Kalista, Thresh, all they need is a certain number of souls before they unlock. So you just play Shadow Isles, you put in more Shadow Isle units, and then eventually they'll unlock. When they unlock, you put them in, farm more souls, etc., etc. You get to Thresh. So really straightforward if you're playing the line. Next up is the Shurima set. So remember, Azir is how you get Shurima started. And once you have Azir, that lets you unlock Nasus, Renekton, and Xerath. Now, these numbers might change. They did during PBE for balance reasons, but do remember that unlocking one of them will make the others harder. So you want to start with the hardest one first, which is obviously going to be Xerath, right? Loss win loss, the mixed streak is really hard to control. So you want to minimize how long you have to do that. And I think right now as of recording, it's 3, which is already pretty difficult, right? Basically, if you want to go lose, win, lose, that gives you Xerath. And then if you have the HP for it, keep losing to unlock Nasus. The reason I want to do that is, as the stages get on, player damages get higher. So losses are more costly later on. So ideally, if you have an early Azir, and you should only go for the Prismatic if you have an early Azir, in stage 4 is do that loss win loss, and then take your losses in that stage 4 where play damage is not as high. Get your Nasus, and then spike with 3 Shurima, 2-star Nasus. The Xerath charm with his charms in the back is going to do a lot to give you a lot of combat, and then hopefully you'll win streak from there into Renekton. That's the recommended order. Xerath into Nasus into Renekton. If you do it any other way, it's going to be really hard. I don't think I've seen anyone do it in a different direction. Sometimes if you're really ahead, you can start off with Xerath and go win, loss, win, and then just win streak into Renekton, and then you just sacrifice whatever number of rounds for Nasus. But if you're getting to Nasus as the last one, you're gonna need like 5 or 6 losses, and in stage 4, pretty rare you have the HP to do that unless you're in a really easy lobby or you're really high rolling. So again, these only matter if you're looking for Azir and playing Shurima. Otherwise, a lot of the time you'll play Azir with just one of these other units for 2 Shurima, and in that case, it doesn't really matter what your streaks look like. I think no matter what you do, eventually you unlock one of them after like 3 or 4 rounds. Nidalee is another specific one. Requires you to field 2 2-star Neeko. So really only relevant if you're doing some kind of Neeko reroll. There is an Ishtar reroll board right now, so it's something that you'll unlock naturally if you're playing that. Now, the one trick to know about this is a lot of people think you need to put 2 Neekos on the board together, but all it cares about is that you have 2 stars worth of Neekos represented on the board. So if you're not going to itemize Nidalee right away, and a lot of the time you don't in this Ishtar reroll line, she's kind of just there to put in 5 Ishtar or just as a secondary to replace Kiana. But you can just wait until you get a Neeko 3. And once you have a Neeko 3 on the board, you don't have to do anything else. You don't need a second Neeko or anything. Just having a single Neeko 3 on your board will unlock Nidalee. So if you're really specifically looking to unlock Nidalee early to itemize and get some more board presence, then you can on a PvE round just put in, if you have two Neeko 2 stars, that will do the unlock. But if not, you might as well just wait until you have Neeko 3 to unlock Nidalee, so she's not taking up space on your bench, and you don't buy her earlier than you need. Next up, we have Yone. Again, very specific because Yone is made to work with Yasuo. So unless you are doing a Yasuo reroll, you shouldn't need to unlock Yone, and luckily you don't unless you have a 3-star Yasuo already. One thing to keep in mind for Yone, if you know about the Prismatic Ionia trait. So Ionia has an augment, which if you get to 10 Ionia, will unlock a prismatic version. Keep in mind, normally you don't get that. So if you just play 10 Ionia without that augment, it'll just be a regular trait and you'll be really disappointed. But with that prismatic one, you do need 10 Ionia on the board at level 10. And to do that, you will have to either get a +1 Ionia or you have to unlock Yone. Now, playing a 2-cost reroll and getting to level 10 is actually pretty difficult. So it's not generally recommended to chase that unless you actually have the +1. But if you do, or if you're playing Yasuo reroll, then Yone will get unlocked. He's an extra Slayer, so he gives you Ionia Slayer to pair with Yasuo. So really great in that line. As of recording, Yasuo reroll is not super popular right now. It's a little bit underpowered. But, you know, if you ever pops off, then it's a unit you'll just naturally get by playing that line. And next up, Veigar is actually one of the units I never unlocked on PvE. You need 2 death caps to equip onto a single unit. Now, that might sound not too bad, but it's actually really hard to get 4 rods. And if you're trying to play flexibly, you're not generally going to want to hoard up your rods just to unlock Veigar. Honestly, the easiest way to unlock this is there's the Prismatic Augment that gives you 4 rods right away. That's double death cap. Gets you that Veigar. I believe you only get that stage 4 though, so maybe you can get that stage 3, but it's a pretty steep requirement for a kind of middling unit. Another thing to keep in mind, similar to the Prismatic Ionia, there is a Prismatic Yordle Augment that requires 10 Yordle. And if you want 10 Yordle, one of those is going to have to be Veigar, or you need an emblem. So do keep that in mind. It's a little bit easier to play for 10 Yordle than to play for 10 Ionia when you're rerolling Yasuo, because your Yordle trait does help you get those rerolls. And last, alphabetically, but also on this tier list, and hopefully I'll pronounce it correctly this time, it's Zahen. This one, I never got in PvE. I have not seen Xin Zhao's hero augment yet, but the only way to unlock Zahen is to have Xin Zhao's hero augment and then keep him alive for 5 combat rounds. Not too difficult right now, but it does require you getting that hero augment, which, again, if you don't see it ever, you won't ever get to click this. And if you want to complete your lore finder, you're going to have to unlock Zahen at some point, but not one you have to think about at all. You know, he does stuff on the board, you'll see him if someone gets him. Definitely the least important unit of the unlockables to worry about, and definitely worthy of the 40th spot on this tier list. All right, and that covers every single unlockable champion. I've been here a while. I'm pretty tired, so hopefully that was enough info. We went in depth on every single one, gave some tips and tricks as well, so you hopefully know how to better play them in the comps that you want to unlock them for as well. Good luck everyone out there completing your lore finders. I hope you get dropped Chinchao's hero augment as early as you can. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and drop a comment below to help support me. And for Set 16, I'll be making a lot of videos around flex play. So if you're interested in that topic, make sure you're subscribed to know when new lessons are available. But other than that, good luck with your climbs and class dismissed.